Okay, so now let's proceed to female reproductive cycle. So in female reproductive cycle, there are 2 cycles, which are the first one are ovarian cycle, second are menstrual cycle. So ovarian cycle will occur in the ovary, menstrual cycle occurs in the uterus. Okay, so make sure all of you take note what I am going to explain in this process. Okay, awak mesti kena fokus apa yang saya nak explain selepas ni. Okay, so if you look at this diagram, so this is what is occur in the ovary ataupun kita panggil dia sebagai ovarian cycle, and then this is what is occur in the uterus, or we call as menstrual cycle. Okay, so for both ovarian cycle and also menstrual cycle, you have to know what are the events that occurs in both of the cycle, and also what are the hormones that involved in this both cycle. Okay, so firstly we start with ovarian cycle. Okay, so kita tengok dulu apa tu ovarian cycle. So ovarian cycle is a series of event in the ovaries that occur during and after the maturation of oocyte. Okay, so means that for ovarian cycle you have to know the series of event that occur in the ovary. Okay, that occur during and after the maturation of oocyte. Okay, and then it refers to the development occurring in the ovary. So you have to know what is developed inside of the ovary. Okay, and then consists of 2 main phases, which are follicular phase and also luteal phase. So this is follicular phase and this is luteal phase, and in between the 2 phases is ovulation. So di antara follicular phase and also luteal phase, okay, di tengah-tengah ni adalah ovulation. So apa yang awak perlu tahu di sini adalah awak mesti kena tahu macam mana nak explain each of the phases. Okay, so we start with follicular phases. So follicular phase dia akan berlaku di sini lah. Okay, so during follicular phase, first point, okay, hypothalamus secrete gonadotropin releasing hormone or GnRH. So remember, apa-apa pun mesti kena bermula dengan hypothalamus. So apa yang hypothalamus akan buat? Hypothalamus will secrete gonadotropin releasing hormone or GnRH. Okay, and then GnRH stimulate anterior pituitary gland to secrete follicle stimulating hormone or FSH and luteinizing hormone or LH. Okay, so kalau kita tengok dekat sini, so this is the graph for FSH and then this is the graph of LH. So once GnRH stimulate the anterior pituitary gland, so this anterior pituitary gland will secrete FSH and also LH. Okay, so FSH will stimulate follicle to grow. So inside of the ovary, it has follicle. Okay, so once FSH is already secreted by anterior pituitary gland, so the function of FSH, it will stimulate the development or it will stimulate the growth of the follicle. So the growth of the follicle tu maksudnya daripada primary follicle it will become growing follicle or secondary follicle. Okay, and then next it will become matured follicle or Graafian follicle. Okay, then the developing follicle produce estradiol or estrogen. Okay, remember estradiol dengan estrogen adalah benda yang sama. Okay, so this follicle, this developing follicle will produce estradiol or estrogen. So that's why kalau kita tengok based on this graph, once this follicle begins to develop, so the level of estrogen akan increase. Okay. And then next point, there is a slow rise in estradiol or estrogen secrete during follicular phase. Okay, so during follicular phase, the level or there is a slow rise in estrogen produce. Okay, there is a slow rise in estradiol produce. So the low level of estradiol or estrogen keep FSH and LH level low. So means that if the level of estradiol and or estrogen is low, so it will keep FSH and also LH also low. Okay. Then, the secretion of estradiol by growing follicle increase sharply. So, kalau kita tengok dekat sini, once follicle develop to become matured follicle, so the secretion of estrogen will increase sharply. Okay, dia akan meningkat. Okay, and then the high concentration of estradiol or estrogen stimulate the increase of LH concentration, or we call this as positive feedback. So means that when the high concentration of estrogen, bila saja the concentration of estrogen of estradiol is increased, so it will stimulate the increase of LH concentration. Okay, so yang ni yang kita panggil sebagai positive feedback. Okay, so the high level of LH will stimulate final maturation of follicle to become Graafian follicle. So the high level of LH will stimulate the final maturation of follicle. So the matured follicle we call as Graafian follicle, and also the high level of LH will stimulate ovulation. Maksudnya ovulation hanya akan berlaku bila saja level of LH is high or increase, ataupun kita panggil sebagai LH surge. Okay, so LH surge will trigger ovulation. So what happened during ovulation? During ovulation, Graafian follicle ruptured. Nampak tak ni ruptured? Okay. And then it will release secondary oocyte. So secondary oocyte tu actually dia berada di dalam this follicle. Okay. So let's say ni adalah matured follicle ataupun Graafian follicle. When the level or when the concentration of LH is high, so it will stimulate the final maturation of follicle to become Graafian follicle, and also it will stimulate ovulation. So what is the meaning of ovulation? Ovulation means Graafian follicle ruptured and release secondary oocyte. Okay, so this is follicular phase. Okay, next we look at luteal phase. What happened after ovulation? Okay, so after ovulation, okay, the phase we call as luteal phase. So, after ovulation, LH stimulate the transformation of Graafian follicle into Corpus Luteum. So, means that tadi bila berlaku ovulation, this Graafian follicle ruptured and release secondary oocyte. So what happened to this Graafian follicle in luteal phase? Okay, LH will stimulate the transformation of this Graafian follicle to become Corpus Luteum. Okay, so Corpus Luteum secrete progesterone and estradiol. So this is Corpus Luteum. So once Corpus Luteum is already formed, so this Corpus Luteum will secrete both progesterone and also estradiol or estrogen. Okay, and then as the level of progesterone and estradiol rise, they exert negative feedback on hypothalamus. So kalau kita tengok pada luteal phase, the level of progesterone and also estrogen of estradiol are high. So the high level of these two hormones will exert negative feedback on hypothalamus. So what happened? It will inhibit the secretion of LH and FSH. So ingat macam ni je. Bila progesterone dengan estrogen tinggi, so it will give negative feedback towards the hypothalamus. So that's why the secretion of LH and also FSH will be reduced. Okay. And then near the end of luteal phase, Corpus Luteum disintegrate. Okay, so if you look at here, okay, so near the end of luteal phase, what happened to the Corpus Luteum? Corpus Luteum will be disintegrate or degenerate. Okay, so once Corpus Luteum is disintegrate or degenerate, it will trigger sharp decline in estradiol and progesterone concentration. Okay, kenapa berlaku decline in estradiol and progesterone concentration? Because of what? Corpus luteum tadi dia akan secrete progesterone and estrogen. Tapi bila berlaku degenerating of corpus luteum, so that's why progesterone and also estrogen is no longer produced or no longer secreted by corpus luteum. So that's why there is a sharp decline in estradiol or estrogen and progesterone concentration. So the pituitary begins to secrete enough FSH to stimulate the growth of new follicles in the ovary. Okay, so here there are two possibilities what happened to the corpus luteum if there is a fertilization occur or if there is no fertilization occur. Okay, let's say if fertilization is occur, so what happened to this corpus luteum? Corpus luteum is maintained by HCG. Okay, so what is HCG? HCG means human chorionic gonadotropin that is released by developing embryo. Maksudnya, this HCG hormone hanya akan ada pada female yang pregnant. Okay, because of what? This HCG is released by developing embryo. Okay, and then what happened to the corpus luteum? Okay, corpus luteum secrete progesterone and progesterone maintain the thickening of endometrium and ready for implantation. Okay, maksudnya adalah untuk berlaku implantation, okay, the corpus luteum must continuously secrete the progesterone. So the progesterone level must be high. So that's why it will maintain the thickening of the endometrium. So that's why implantation of embryo can occur. But what is the difference if fertilization does not occur? So if fertilization does not occur, what happened to the corpus luteum? Corpus luteum will be disintegrate or degenerate, and then the level of progesterone and estradiol decrease. So what happened? Menstruation will occur. So FSH and LH no longer inhibit. So follicle development will begin again. Okay. So maksudnya di sini kalau berlaku fertilization, the corpus luteum will be maintained by HCG and will continuously to secrete progesterone and estrogen. So the progesterone will maintain the thickening of endometrium. And then if fertilization does not occur, so this corpus luteum will be disintegrate or degenerate. So what happened to the level of progesterone and estrogen? It will be decreased. So what happened to the endometrium lining? It will be degenerate. Okay, so yang tu nanti ada kaitan dengan menstrual cycle. So, bila endometrium lining is degenerate, so that's why kita katakan dah berlaku menstruation. Okay, so what happened to the FSH dengan LH? FSH and LH is no longer inhibited. Okay, so follicle development will begin again. Okay. Okay, so now we look at the overview of what is happened during ovarian cycle. Okay, so remember, okay, for ovarian cycle, it will begins with hypothalamus. So hypothalamus will secrete GnRH, and then GnRH will stimulate anterior pituitary gland to secrete FSH and also LH. Okay, so remember for this graph, so means that bila sahaja hypothalamus secrete GnRH, GnRH will stimulate anterior pituitary gland. So anterior pituitary gland will secrete FSH and LH. Okay, so this is FSH and then this one is LH. Okay, so what is the function of FSH? FSH will stimulate the growing follicle. So bila ada hormon FSH, this follicle will grow or this follicle will develop to become matured follicle or Graafian follicle. Okay, and then as follicle is grow, so it will secrete estradiol or estrogen. So actually the function of estradiol or estrogen is to healing and repair the endometrium. So this one actually kita akan discuss dalam menstrual cycle. Okay, and then when estradiol level rise, so LH and FSH level also increase. Okay, so what happened to LH when the level of LH is increased or when there is a high level of LH. LH will stimulate the final maturation of follicle to become Graafian follicle, and also LH will stimulate ovulation. So what is the meaning of ovulation? Ovulation means Graafian follicle ruptured and release secondary oocyte. So this secondary oocyte is ready to be fertilized with the sperm. Okay, and then what happened to this ruptured Graafian follicle? LH will stimulate the transformation of this Graafian follicle to become corpus luteum. And then corpus luteum will secrete progesterone and also estradiol or estrogen. So progesterone will maintain the thickening of endometrium. Okay, and then combination of high level of progesterone and also estrogen or estradiol will inhibit FSH and LH. So this one we call as negative feedback. So awak ingat macam ni, kalau misalnya level of progesterone and also estrogen is high, so it will inhibit. Inhibit means dia akan merencatkan the secretion of FSH and LH. Okay, so if there is no fertilization, what happened to this corpus luteum? Corpus luteum will be degenerate or disintegrate, and then the level of progesterone and also estrogen will be decreased. So once progesterone and estrogen level decrease, what happened to the endometrium lining? Endometrium lining will be degenerate. Okay? Ataupun kita panggil sebagai menstruation is occur. Okay, if fertilization is occur, so corpus luteum is maintained by HCG that is released by developing embryo. So corpus luteum will continuously secrete progesterone and also estrogen. So that's why the endometrium lining will be maintained and ready to be implanted by embryo. Okay.